Chapter 4. The Keeper of the Keys. Boom! They knocked again. Dudley jerked awake. "Where's the cannon?" he said stupidly. There was a crash behind him, and Uncle Vernon came skidding into the room. He was holding his rifle in his hands. Now they knew what had been in that long, thin package he had brought with him. "Who's there?" he shouted. "I warn you, I'm armed." There was a pause, then smash! The door was hit with such force that it swung clean off its hinges. With a deafening crash, it landed flat on the floor. A giant of a man, was standing in the doorway. His face was almost completely hidden by a long, shaggy mane of hair and wild, tangled beard, but could make out his eyes, glinting black beetles under his hair. The giant squeezed his way into the hut, stooping so that his head just brushed the ceiling. He bent down and picked up the door and fitted it back into its frame. The noise from the storm outside dropped a little. He turned and looked at them all. "Could you make a cup of tea, could you? It's not been an easy journey." He strode over to the sofa while Dudley was sat frozen with fear. "Budge up, could you good lump," said the stranger. Dudley squeaked, and ran and hid behind his mother. He was crouching, terrified, behind Uncle Vernon. "Ah, here's Harry," he said the giant. Harry looked up into the face of the wild, shadowy face. He saw the beetle eyes that were crinkled in a smile. "Last time I saw you, you was only a baby." And the giant said, "Yeah, look at you. Look at your dad. You look like your dad, but you have your mom's eyes." Uncle Vernon made a funny rasping noise. "I demand you leave at once, sir," he said. "You are breaking and entering." "Ah, shut up, Dursley, you great prune," said the giant. He reached over to the back of the sofa, jerked out the gun of Uncle Vernon's hands, bent it into a knot easily as if it had been rubber, and threw it in the corner of the room. Uncle Vernon made another funny noise, like a mouse being trotted away. "Anyway, Harry," the giant said, turning his back on the Dursleys, "very happy birthday to you. You got summer for you. Here, I might have sat on it at some point, but it'll taste all right." From the inside of the pocket of the black overcoat, he pulled a slightly squished box. Harry opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a large, sticky chocolate cake that said "Happy Birthday, Harry" written on it, green icing. Harry looked up at the giant. He meant to say thank you, but he got lost on the way out of his mouth, and what he said was, "Who are you?" The giant chuckled. "True. I haven't introduced myself. Me, Rufus Hagrid, keeper of the grounds at Hogwarts." He held out an enormous hand and shook Harry's whole arm. "What about that tea, eh?" he said, rubbing his hands together. "I did not say I would not say no to something stronger if you got it. You mind?" His eyes fell on the empty gate that shriveled up chip bags and snorted. He bent down over the fireplace and couldn't see what he was doing when he drew back a second time later. There was a roaring fire in there. It filled the whole damp hut, the flickering light, and Harry felt the warmth wash over him through the though he had sunk into a hot bath. The giant sat back down on the sofa, which sagged under his weight, and he began taking all sorts of things out of his pockets: a coat, a copper kettle, a squishy package of sausage, a poker, a teapot, several chip mugs, a bottle of amber liquid that he took a swig of before he started to make tea. Soon the hut was full of the sound and smell of sizzling sausage. Nobody said a thing while the giant was working, but he slid in the first 6 fat, juicy, slightly burnt sausages from the poker. Dudley fidgeted until Uncle Vernon sharply said, "Don't you touch anything he gives you, Dudley." The giant chuckled darkly. "Ha! Your great puddin'est son don't need no fattening any more, Dursley. Don't worry." He passed the sausages to Harry, who was hungry as he'd ever tasted anything so wonderful, but he couldn't take his eyes off this giant. Finally, as nobody seemed to explain anything, I'm sorry, but I really don't know who you are. The giant took a big gulp of tea and wiped back his mouth. He said, Call me Hagrid, he said. Everyone does. And like I told you, I'm keeper of the keys of Hogwarts. You'll know all about Hogwarts, of course. No, said Harry. Hagrid looked shocked. Sorry, Harry said quickly. Sorry, barked Hagrid, turning at the Dursleys, who shrank back in the shadows. It's them that should be sorry. I knew you were getting your letters, but never thought you would even know about Hogwarts, for crying out loud. Do you even wonder where your parents had learned it all? All what? Harry asked. All what? Hagrid thundered. Now wait just a minute. A second. He leapt to his feet, and his anger seemed to fill the whole hut. The Dursleys were cowering against the wall. Do you mean to tell me, he growled at Dursley, that this boy, knows nothing about anything? Harry thought he was going a bit far. He'd been to school, after all, and his marks weren't bad. Well, I know some things, Harry said. I can, do math and stuff like that. But Hagrid simply waved his wand and said, About our world, I mean. Your world, my world, your parents' world. What world? Hagrid looked as if he was going to explode. Dursley! He boomed. Uncle Vernon, who had gone very pale, whispered something. It sounded like Mimble, Wimble, Wimble, Wimble. Hagrid stared wildly at Harry. But you must have known your mom and dad, he said. I mean, they're famous. You're famous. What? My my mom and dad were famous, were they? You don't know. You don't know? Hagrid ran his fingers through his hair, fixing Harry with a bewildered stare. You don't know what you are? He said finally. Uncle Vernon suddenly found his voice. Stop! He commanded. Stop right there, sir. I forbid you to tell that boy anything. A braver man than Vernon Dursley would have quailed under a furious look of Hagrid now that gave him. When Hagrid spoke, every syllable trembled with rage. You never told him? Never told him what was in the letter Dumbledore left for him? I was there. I saw Dumbledore leave it. Dursley? And if you kept it from him all these years? Kept what from me? Harry said eagerly. Stop it! I forbid you! Yelled Uncle Vernon in panic. Aunt Petunia gave a gasp of horror. Ah! Go boil your heads, both ya, he said to Harry. Hagrid. Harry, you're a wizard. There was silence inside the hut. Only the sea and the whistling wind could be heard. I'm a what? Gasped Harry. You're a wizard, Harry. A wizard, of course, said Hagrid, sitting back down on the sofa, which groaned even lower. A thumping good one, I'd say, once you've been trained up a bit. With your mom and dad like yours, what else could you be? And I reckon it's about time you read your letter. Harry re- stretched out his hand and took the yellowish envelope and addressed in emerald green to Mr. H. Potter, the floor, hut on the rock, the sea, and pulled the letter out and read. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Headmaster Albus Dumbledore, Order of Merlin, First Class Grand Sorcerer, Chief Warlock, Supreme Mugglewump, International Confederation of Wizards. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have just been accepted to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find and enclose list of necessary books and equipment. Term begins September 1st. We await your owl no later than July 31st. Sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. Questions exploded in Harry's head, and like fireworks, when he couldn't decide what to ask first. A few minutes he just stammered and said, "What does that mean, they await my owl?" "Oh, galloping gorgons, remind me," said Gagrig, grabbing his forehead enough force to knock over a cart horse. From your pocket, he pulled out an overcoat. He pulled out an owl, a real live, rather ruffled looking owl, a long quill, and a roll of parchment with his tongue between his teeth, and he scribbled a note that Harry could read upside down. "Dear Professor Dumbledore, given Harry's letter, taking him to buy things tomorrow. Weather's horrible. Hope you are well. Hagrid." Hagrid rolled up the note, gave it to the owl, which clamped onto its beak, went to the door. He threw the owl out in the storm, then came back and sat down as though it was as normal as talking on the telephone. Harry realized his mouth was open and closed it quickly. "Ah, where was I?" said Hagrid. But the moment Uncle Vernon, still ashen-faced, looked like very angry, moved into the firelight. "He's not going," he said. Hagrid grunted. "I'd like to see a great muggle like you stop him," he said. "A what?" Harry said, interested. "A muggle," said Harry. "Is that what we call non-magic folks, like them? And it's your bad luck. You grew up in a family of the biggest muggles I've ever laid eyes on." "We swore when we took him in we'd put a stop to this rubbish," said Uncle Vernon. "Swore we'd stamp it out of him. Wizard indeed." "You knew?" Harry said. "You knew I was a wizard?" "Knew?" shrieked Aunt Petunia suddenly. "Knew? Of course we knew! How could you not be? My dratted sister, being what she was, oh, she got a letter, just like you, and disappeared off like that to that school. And she came back every vacation with her pockets full of frog spawn and turning teacups into rats. I was the only one who saw her for what she was, a freak. But with my mother and father, oh no, it was Lily this and Lily that and Lily this. They were so proud to have a witch in the family." She stopped to draw in a breath, and then went on ranting. It seemed like it had been she'd been wanting to do this all these years. "Then she met that Potter at school, and she left and got married, and she had you. And of course I knew you'd be just the same, just as strange, just as abnormal as them, if you please. They went on and got herself blown up, and then we got landed with you." Harry had gone very white, and soon found his voice and said, "Blown up? You told me they died in a car crash." "A car crash?" roared Hagrid, jumping up so angrily that Dursley scuttled back in the corner. "How could a car crash kill Lily and James Potter? It's an outrage, a scandal. Harry Potter not knowing his own story, even when every kid in the world knows his name." "But why? What happened?" Harry asked urgently. The anger faded from Hagrid's face. He looked suddenly anxious. "Oh, never expected this," he said, in a low, worried voice. "I had no idea. Dumbledore told me you might be trouble getting a hold of you. How much you didn't know. Harry, I don't know if I'm the right person to tell you, but someone's gotta. You can't go off to Hogwarts not knowing." He threw a dirty look to Dursley's. "Well, it's best you know as much as I can tell you. Mind, I can't tell you everything. It's a great mystery part of it." He sat down on the fire in a few seconds, and then he said, "It begins, I suppose, with a person called, but it's incredible. You don't know his name. Everyone in the world knows." "Who?" "Well, I don't like saying the name if I can help it. No one does." "Why not?" "Gulping gargoyles, Harry. People are still scared. Blimey! This is difficult. See, there was this wizard who went bad. As bad as you could go. Worse than bad. His name was—" Hagrid gulped, but no words could come out. "Could you write it down?" Harry suggested. "Nah, can't spell it." "All right. Oh, Voldemort." Hagrid shuddered. "Don't make me say it again." Anyway, this wizard was about 20 years ago now. Started looking for followers. Got 'em too. Some were afraid, some were just wanted a bit of his power, because he was getting himself power all right. Dark days, Harry. Don't don't know who to trust. Don't dare get friendly with strange wizards or witches. Terrible things happen. He was taken over. Of course, someone stood up to him, and he killed him. Horribly, one of the only safe place left was Hogwarts. Reckon Dumbledore's the only one you know who was afraid of. Didn't dare try taking the school. Just then, anyway. Now, your mom and dad, they were good as witches wizard as I ever knew. Head boy and girl at Hogwarts in their day. Suppose mystery is why you know who never tried to get them on their side before. Probably knew they were too close to Dumbledore to want anything to do with the dark side. Maybe he thought he could persuade him. Maybe he just wanted him out of the way. All anyone knows is he turned up in the village where y'all were living on Halloween night 10 years ago. You were just a year old. He came to your house and Hagrid suddenly pulled out a very dirty, spotted handkerchief and blew his nose, which sounded like a foghorn. Sorry, he said, but it's so sad. I knew your mom and dad. They were nicer people you couldn't find. Anyway, you know who killed him. And then, and then this is the real mystery of it all, of the thing. He tried to kill you too. Wanted to make a clean job of it, I suppose. Or maybe he just liked killing by then. But he couldn't do it. Never wondered how you got that mark on your forehead? Was it no, that's no ordinary cut. That's what you get when a powerful evil curse touches you. Took care of your mom and dad and your house. But it didn't work on you. And that's why you're famous, Harry. No one ever lived if after he decided to kill you. No one except you. He killed some of the best witches and wizards of the age. The McKinnons, the Bones, the Pruitts, and you. Well, only a baby, and you lived. Something very painful was going on in Harry's mind. All Hagrid's story started to come to a close. He saw again a blinding flash of green light, more clearly than he'd ever remembered it before. And he remembered something else for the first time in his life, a cold, cruel laugh. Hagrid watching him sadly. I took you from your ruined house meself, on Dumbledore's orders, brought you to this lot. Load of tosh, said Uncle Vernon. Harry jumped up. He had almost forgotten that the Dursleys were there. Uncle Vernon certainly seemed to have gotten back his courage. He was glaring at Hagrid, and his fists were clenched. Now you listen here, boy. He snarled. I accept something strange about you. Probably nothing a good beating wouldn't have cured. And for all of this about your parents, well, they were weirdos. No denying it. But the world's a much better place without them, in my opinion. As for all they got, getting mixed up with these wizarding types. Just what I expected. Always knew they'd come to a sticky end. But at the moment, Hagrid leapt up from the sofa, drew a battered pink umbrella from inside his coat, pointing it at Uncle Vernon like a sword, and he said, I'm warning you, Dursley. I'm warning you, one more word. In danger of being speared by the end of the umbrella by a bearded giant, Uncle Vernon's courage failed again. He flattened himself against the wall and fell silent. That's better, said Hagrid, breathing heavily and sitting back down on the sofa, which this time sagged right to the floor. Meanwhile, Harry still had questions. He asked them, but what happened to I'm sorry, you know who? Good question, Hattie. He disappeared, vanished. Same night he tried to kill you. Makes you even more famous. That's the biggest mystery, see? He was getting more and more powerful. Why'd he go? Some say he died, codswallop in my opinion. Don't know if he had enough human left in him to die. Some say he's still out there, biding his time, like but I don't believe it. People who was on his side came back to ours. Some of 'em came out of kind of trances. Don't reckon they could have done if he was coming back. Most of us reckon he's still out there somewhere, but lost powers, too weak to carry on. 'Cause something about you finished him, Harry. There's something going on that night he hadn't counted on. I dunno what it was, no one does, but something about you stumped him all right. Hagrid looked at Harry with warmth and respect blazing in his eyes, but Harry, instead of feeling pleased and proud, felt quite sure there had been a horrible mistake. A wizard? Him? How could he possibly be? He spent his life being clouted by Dudley and bullied by Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon. If he was really a wizard, why hadn't he turned them into warty toads every time they tried to look at him or lock him in the closet cupboard? If he'd once defeated the great sorcerer of the world, how come Dudley had always been able to kick him around like a football? Hagrid, he said quietly, I think you must have made a mistake. I don't think I could be a wizard. To his surprise, Hagrid chuckled. Not a wizard, eh? Never make things happen when you scared or angry? Harry looked into the fire. Now he came to think about it. Every odd thing that he ever made his aunt and uncle furious with him had happened when he, Harry, had been upset or angry. Chased by Dudley's gang, he had somehow found himself out of their reach. Dreading to go to school with a ridiculous haircut, he managed to make it grow back. And the very last time Dudley hit him, hadn't got his revenge without even realizing it. He even says a boa constrictor on him. Harry looked back at Hagrid, smiling, and saw Hagrid was positively beaming at him. See? Said Hagrid. Harry Potter, not a wizard. Oh, you wait. You'll be famous at Hogwarts. But Uncle Vernon was not giving up without a fight. Haven't I told you he's not going? He hissed. He's going to Stonewall High School, and he'll be grateful for it. I've read these letters, and he needs all sorts of rubbish spell books and wands, and if he wants to go, be a great muggle like you won't stop him, howled Hagrid. Stop Lily and Jane Potter's son from going to Hogwarts? You're mad! His name has been down in the book ever since he was born. He's off to the finest school of witchcraft and wizardry in the world. 7 years there, and he won't know himself. He'll be the youngest of his own sort for a change, and he'll be under the greatest headmaster of Hogwarts ever had, Albus Dumble. I'm not paying for some crackpot old fool to teach him magic tricks, yelled Miss Uncle Vernon. But he finally had gone too far. Hagrid seized the umbrella, whirled it over his. Never, he thundered. Insult Albus Dumbledore in front of me. He brought down the umbrella, swishing it around in the air, pointed at Dudley. There was a flash of violet of light, a sound like a firecracker, a sharp squeal, and next second, Dudley was dancing on the spot and his hand clasped over his fat bottom, howling in pain. He turned his back to them. Harry saw a curly pig's tail poking through the hole of his trousers. Uncle Vernon roared, pulling Aunt Petunia and Dudley into the other room. He cast a last terrified look at Hagrid and slammed the door behind them. Hagrid looked down at his umbrella and stroked his beard. Shouldn't have lost my temper, he said, ruefully. But it didn't work anyway. I meant to turn him into a pig, but I suppose he's so much like a pig anyway, there wasn't much left to do. He cast a sideway look at Harry with his bushy eyebrows. Be grateful if you didn't mention that to anyone at Hogwarts, he said. I'm not supposed to do magic, strictly speaking. I was allowed to do a bit to follow you and get your letters to you and stuff. One of the reasons I was keen on taking the job. Why aren't you supposed to do magic? Asked Harry. Oh, well, I was at Hogwarts myself, and I got expelled. To tell you the truth, in my third year, they snapped me wand in half. Everything everything. But Dumbledore, he let me stay as a gamekeeper. Great man, Dumbledore. Why were you expelled? Oh, it's getting late. We've got lots to do tomorrow, said Hagrid. Gotta get it to town and get all your books and that. He took off his thick black coat and threw it over to Harry. You can keep under that, he said. Don't mind if it wiggles a bit. I think there might be a couple of dormice in one of the pockets.